Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy raised by Big Mom Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video and also share this video with your friends. I have created my other videos playlist, there you can watch my all videos easily, check out as well. Let's start this video. Big Mom was enjoying her snack and waiting on the report she had ordered of Monkey D. Luffy's family. That Balsy brat had claimed to have eaten all of her candy from Fishman Island and then said he would defeat her. Now, despite what most of the world thought, including some of her own subjects, she knew Big Mom was not easy to anger most of the time. A child like Luffy boasting big, she was used to hearing it. Honestly, he wouldn't be the first to try and fight her, and he won't be the last, she was certain. Besides, she has 85 children that she raised from birth until now. She was more than used to hearing them boast that they were going to be stronger than her back when they were younger, especially her boys. She never really took offense to someone claiming that they were going to kick her ass. Honestly, she has heard it hundreds of times before, so why would she? What pissed her off the most about the brat was the obvious lie to her about how he had eaten all of her fishman candy and that he had the missing member of the Vinsmix that she was going to arrange for her beloved Pudding to marry on his crew. While she never truly favored one child over the other, although she found it impossible to look at and interact with her daughter Chiffon without flying into a rage thanks to her twin sister Lola's desertion, she did admit that she spoiled Pudding more than the others and gave her more attention. Thanks to her third eye giving her the ability to read poneglyphs, the very few who somehow found out about this ability and knew about the red poneglyph in her possession often tried to kidnap or kill Pudding. Especially back when she had been a baby. Dolce. Dreji. What have I told you about pulling Anna's hair? The voice of one of her elder children, Bruly, her beautiful broken inside 8th daughter, demanded, snapping Big Mom out of her thoughts and drawing her gaze from the small by comparing pastry in her hand to some of her younger children. Bruly, the proud but scarred mirror user, was holding little Anana, her 37th daughter and a true little terror in the making, on one rather bony hip and was reprimanding the twins who were holding the remains from their balloons, now, and looking a bit miserable. Judging by the mirror shards, it was obvious that Bruly had popped the boys' balloons this time instead of Anana herself, probably for pulling their sister's hair. But Bruny, she's a psychopath. The twins protested in unison, like they so often did, and made Anana look upset with tears in her eyes and the older siblings to wince since they knew what that word did to their sister and they didn't mean the little one. What have I said about calling her that? Bruly demanded, looking furious and disappointed with the two boys, and Big Mom as well as some of the older children knew why. Bruly had been interested in a rather good-looking and wealthy son of a noble back when she had been 16, but the boy had turned out to be a true sociopath and psychopath and kept it hidden for a few years. The day before the two of them were to be married on Bruly's 21st birthday, the boy had snapped and tried to kill his fiancée. He had cut off Bruly's nose and gave her a horrible scar that went diagonally across her face, just barely missing her left eye. It had only been thanks to luck and her siblings wanting to see their sister one last time before she was married that they had been able to get to her before she bled out and managed to reattach her nose despite the fact that it was discolored now. He had mutilated one of her babies and nearly killed her the day before she married him. It was supposed to have been the happiest day of her daughter's life, and yet it ended up being one of the darkest. Perospero had been the one to get there first and had surprised most of them when his calm if not slightly unhinged personality went full on protective fiery rage on the one who had dared to harm one of his baby sisters. It had taken Big Mom, who had been holding back greatly, lest she risk crippling or even killing her eldest son, several dozen chess peacekeepers, Kompet and the triplets, Kompet, Kakuri, Oven and Ifuku, were only assisting on their mother's orders and even then didn't give it their all, and she couldn't blame them, to keep the eldest child from outright killing his sister's attacker. He had been very pissed when he had been stopped and had stayed that way for over an hour right up until Big Mom told him that she was sure all of Bruly's siblings wanted to show their disappointment in his actions to the man himself. Once the siblings were done but left the scumbag alive on their mother's orders, Big Mom drained his soul slowly over the course of weeks to months until Bruly was finally recovered enough physically, emotionally and mentally to see the man again. She had been jittery, nervous, even outright scared, but she had done it with her two favorite big brothers, standing beside her for support. Big Mom had left just enough of the man's soul in his body for him to be alive and knowing full well who had finally ended his misery and killed him. Bruly had even been gracious, or cruel as some would say, enough to have used the very same knife her former fiancé had used to slash her face open and nearly blinded her in one eye. They had never really told her that while the rest of the siblings old enough to take part tortured the man who had dared harm one of theirs. Amanda and Perospero had been in such a towering rage that just torturing the man hadn't quelled their fury and desire for blood. To keep them from accidentally finishing the job that was Bruly's right to finish, Big Mom had given the two of them a new mission. Destroy that noble son's family and kingdom and make it part of their own as payment for the damage done to her daughter. By the time the two were done they were covered in blood and hadn't left a single one of the man's family members or those who tried to stop him alive. "Sorry, Bruly," the twins said, looking shamefaced and upset once Bruly finally was done, reminding them both a new one for what they had called their younger sister and how they had been treating her. None of the youngest siblings liked the eighth sister being upset or mad at them. "Am I a psychopath?" Anana asked quietly, looking up at her favorite big sister scared and tearfully. Bruly immediately began bouncing the little girl and rocking on her feet slightly as everyone watched, not that the eighth daughter cared in the least, as she focused on the child in her arms. "No, sweetheart. You're nowhere near being a psychopath. You're just a little bit sadistic or perhaps a little more twisted in the mind than some of the rest of us, but that's okay. We're all twisted in our own ways and some more than others. So what do you like to cut things or pop air balloons? Maybe that means you'll take an interest in swordsmanship or at least knife wielding as your fighting style, or maybe you'll be more interested in being in the medical field like a surgeon." Bruly quickly began to softly soothe her little sister, well, one of the littlest ones that is. Despite being vain and arrogant around outsiders, seeming as if she only wanted to carve up every pretty face she met, she was actually very gentle and understanding with her siblings. All of the Charlotte siblings from 9th to 85th looked up to and had a bit of a soft spot for the 8th daughter. Some of the littlest ones like Anana even saw her as a second mama. Adakuri may be the favorite big brother and Kompit may be the eldest sister, but Bruly was the favorite big sister. Oftentimes she had used her mirror powers to check on and keep an eye on her siblings, who all had small mirrors in their possession at all times. And all of her siblings and even her mother knew that if they needed her to be there and simply said her name into a mirror, then she'd hear them and be there in less than a minute. Surgeons have to cut people up to fix them, maybe that's what you'd be into when you're older. But for now it's too early to tell and that's fine. You like cutting things, then you keep cutting things, but don't kill anyone or anything living until you're at least 13, alright? Bruly asked, bouncing her sister a bit more and earning a small smile and a nod from one of the youngest three girls in the family. "Okay." Anana said, cuddling close to her favorite big sister, making Bruly smile warmly at Anana, while Big Mom smiled fondly at her daughters. "You'll make a very good mother one day, Bruly." Big Mom said, not for the first time, making Bruly's eyes widen, and she blushed brightly as she looked away from everyone, but they all saw the small sad smile on her face, even as her reaction caused them all to laugh a bit, except for a few who looked guilty. She was so easily flustered by compliments, even back before she had been scared she had been easy to fluster. Sometimes her siblings would say different things or compliments just to watch their clumsy, ticklish, broken sister blush bright red and flounder about a bit. It was one of the less damaging but still a bit sadistic things the siblings liked to do, sadistic according to their targeted sister of course. Bruly has cursed her siblings out more than once, when the younger ones couldn't hear her while stumbling over her feet in embarrassment. "Mama." Tamago came rushing into the room as fast as he could, only ending up crashing into Bruly. The two of them went down in a swirl of growls, yelps, and curses, while the rest of the Charlotte siblings in attendance either busted out laughing or tried to hide the fact that they were laughing. Leave it to their clumsy accident-prone sister to have that happen to her, although it seemed her observation hockey was getting a bit stronger. Not many of her siblings had noticed it, but Big Mom and the older siblings had. Just before Tamago had entered the room, Bruly stopped blushing as she looked at the door and quickly but carefully tossed Anana to the closest sibling who would catch her. In this case it was Amand, the third-born daughter, who had reacted at a surprisingly fast pace and caught the tossed girl in her arms. "You have 5 seconds to separate yourself from Bruly and 3 to tell me why you were in such a hurry that you disturbed my time with my children," Big Mom said, glaring at Tamago, who hastily scrambled off of Bruly and away from the tall woman. Big Mom didn't often spend a lot of time with her family altogether unless it was a tea party, and even then most of the time a few of her children couldn't make it due to attacking pirates and other such things. When she did spend time with all of her children, even though Katakuri was away at the moment retrieving a present for Bruly's birthday next week, she guarded it fiercely and jealousy. Tamago had been in service to the Charlotte family for a long time, since a year or so before Bruly's ex-fiancé tried to kill her. In fact, he knew that although they didn't often show it openly, especially around others, most of the Charlotte siblings numbers 16 and up were very protective of the 8th sister, to the point where some of them seemed to have a sister complex of sorts. The younger siblings were a bit protective too and very possessive, but they were that protective over all of their loyal siblings. The older ones were more protective of their broken sister than they were their other siblings. "The information you asked for." On Straw Hat Luffy's family. Tamago panted out, making everyone pause for a moment and look at him, while Big Mom's eyes narrowed and Smoothie helped her sister up with a small smile, while Bruly scowled at her siblings, who were still chuckling or giggling at her. "Hurry up and spit it out," Big Mom said, even as she had picked up her youngest daughter to sit on her lap when a little blonde girl held her arms up towards her mother. Big Mom smiled softly down at her youngest as she handed the girl a small tea cake that was about the same size as the child's head, but the little girl had her mother's appetite as she devoured it in less than a minute. His father, like they said at the War of Best. It wasn't a lie to aim the Marines at him. Tamago hurried to rush out while Big Mom looked at him annoyed a bit. Why should she care about the damn war? All she cared about was the fact that Whitebeard had died during it, which had left Fishman Island ripe for the taking, and took it she had. They had delivered the sweets on time ever since she claimed the island, right up until that damn Straw Hat had the gall to claim he had. His father is Monkey D. Dragon, the leader of the revolutionaries. Tamago said, causing most of the older children to jerk slightly as they stared in shock, a few turning towards Bruly, who was frozen at that. Damn Straw Hat. Had Straw Hat Dragon. Everyone could tell when the information processed in Big Mom's mind as her eyes slowly widened, her mouth dropped open a little bit as her gaze swung towards Bruly in an instant. Dragon, but wasn't that? Smoothie trailed off, staring wide-eyed at her siblings that had been old enough to remember when the man had visited their home. The one who stole our nephew. Oven said, his face set into a scowl as the floor heated up slightly underneath his feet at the reminder. That was one of his only and worst failures. Being unable to protect his newborn nephew and keep his sister from breaking. Stole our nephew? Anglias, the youngest son, asked confusedly as he looked at his elder siblings. As far as the younger ones knew, there weren't any nephews other than Chiffon's newborn son with her husband Beej. Monkey D. Dragon. Almost 20 years ago he had shipwrecked on our island. Bruly was the one to find him in the remains of his ship and bring him here for medical assistance. The doctor said that Bruly saved his life by doing that. Tefuku said, scowling darkly as well, although most of the older siblings and Big Mom herself were looking at Bruly in worry. The mirror woman was still frozen in place, wide-eyed. Over the course of a few months Bruly had fallen for him, and it seemed he had fallen for her as well, and thus Mama allowed them to be married. He wasn't bothered by her scar, in fact he had said it just made her look better, since it meant she was strong enough to survive. A man said softly, looking at her younger sister in worry even as she set Anana down on her own feet. But then he left. He left all of a sudden and abandoned us. Because of something to do with the revolutionaries. He promised he'd be here by my side, especially right then, but he just up and left without a single word. Bruly said, clenching her eyes shut tightly as she tried to fight back the memories. The memories of the man who she had fallen for, even though she really should have known better after her first attempt at love backfired so horribly. Not just that, but when he had come back it was only so that he could steal his newborn son, Bruly's newborn son, right from the cradle. He stole your nephew, Bruly's son, and my grandson, and then vanished off the face of the earth before we could find him and get the baby back. Big Mom scowled darkly at that, her powers beginning to surround her in a miasma of rage. Bruly would have been a great mother, she had been looking forward to the baby so eagerly even after Dragon had left. She had been so happy to have a baby of her own to love and care for like she did her little siblings. Tamago. Find out all the information you can on Monkey D. Luffy immediately and then fetch Katakuri. Big Mom ordered the man to run from the room immediately. Don't worry sis. We'll get your baby boy back and welcome him to the family with open arms. Kompet was trying to reassure and soothe her younger sister, who still had her eyes screwed shut and her arms wrapped around her own stomach where her scar was hidden by her dress. Bruly had been very thin even while pregnant, dangerously so. They had to cut open her stomach to get the baby out so that both of them had survived the birthing. You should be proud of your son Bruly. The Charlotte blood seems to run strong in him. Big Mom said softly to her mirror daughter, who looked up at her confused and with tears in her eyes, causing her siblings and mother to be upset. They never liked seeing one of their own cry, especially not a strong if not clumsy woman like Bruly. He's only 19 at the moment and he already has a 300 million berry bounty. I think that's a record for our family, isn't it? Amanda asked, looking at the others who tried thinking about it for a moment. They weren't sure what all of their siblings' bounties were at the age of 19, but their nephew's bounty did beat most of theirs at that age. Although since he's a member of the Charlotte family then maybe he really did eat all of that candy from Fishman Island. Big Mom said thoughtfully and made Bruly snicker a bit, although it was kind of watery. She was obviously trying not to break down in front of everyone. She busted out in hysterical watery laughter at Parasparrow's next sentence then. Looks like our nephew has a sweet tooth then. He'll fit in just fine. Tamago. What have you found out about my grandson? Big Mom asked, looking at the now sweating man a day or two later. Katakuri had gotten back to the chateau a few hours after they had learned about Luffy's family and immediately began tracking down the Straw Hats when he learned about how Luffy was the nephew he hadn't been able to find. He was going to track down his nephew and bring him back. If he was fast, then he could have the boy back in time for Bruly's birthday. It would be the one thing his sister actually wanted for her birthday for the last 19 years, and he was considered the best big brother in the family for a reason. Well, tell me. Bruly said, glaring holes in Tamago's head as she stared at him with such intensity that if she had a heat-based devil fruit, he'd be nothing but ashes. Patience, Bruly. Tamago was just about to start the reports. Perispero said, making his sister take a deep breath and calm herself down so that she wasn't as frantic as she had been for the last day or so. Ever since finding out her son was still alive, she had been rather on edge. It seems he was raised in the East Blue in the Goa Kingdom. Working on the exact island now. Tamago said, making everyone look surprised. Such a strong pirate for being from the weakest sea. Cracker said, making Big Mom grin. He's Charlotte. Even more, he's Bruly's son. Bruly is one of the strongest of you girls. Big Mom said, making Bruly blush brightly but smile slightly at the compliment from her mother. Her mother rarely gave out compliments. It seems that at the age of 17, shortly after setting sail, he had defeated most all of the major pirates from the East Blue, with suffering little to no injury. This list includes Alvida the Iron Mace, Buggy the Clown who is now Warlord, Foldplay Krieg, and Arlong the Fishman. Without the use of hockey. Tamago said, making everyone pause for a moment. No matter how you look at it, that is a bit impressive. Fishmen are naturally stronger than most humans physically. Cinnamon said, a bit impressed at the feat. For the New World raised pirates to do so was only a little impressive, but considering that even though he was born in the New World, he was raised in the weakest sea, it was incredibly impressive. It also seems that his first mate pirate hunters Oro has faced Mihik in battle while in the East Blue and survived a direct attack from the Black Blade. Tamago said next, earning an impressed look from Amand, who was one of the best sword users out of her siblings. To survive a slash from that blade, that's rare. Amand said, her hand resting on the hilt of her own famous sword, a present from her mama for her 20th birthday, after she had bested the kingdom's best swordsman with her practice sword. Mama. I'd expect no less from my grandson's first mate. Big Mom laughed, impressed herself at the fact that some no-name brat from the weakest sea had survived Mihik, even if the warlord hadn't been fighting seriously. Why do I have the feeling I'm not going to like this? Bruly asked, narrowing her eyes at Tamago's worried look. It seems that while in Logtown, Buggy and Alvida joined together their crews in an alliance to execute Straw Hat Luffy. One of our spies was on scene when it happened, and he reported that Straw Hat was caught unaware from behind while on the execution stand and cuffed with sea stone. They were planning to execute him via decapitation in the same spot goal. D. Roger had been executed. Tamago backed away slowly, and no one could blame him. What? Bruly demanded with a screech, standing and making the mirrors in the room begin to tremble as they reacted to their mistress's fury. Obviously it didn't work, Bruly. Calm down and let Tamago finish the report. Compet barked as she felt her sister's powers begin to activate and surge. Now most thought that the mirror fruit wasn't good for anything but spying and ambush tactics, but they forgot something important. A mirror shows a reflection of what's in front of it. Bruly had access to mirrors around the world and could reflect anyone she wanted to and their powers at a moment's notice. Sister breath. Amand said slowly as she placed a hand on her younger sister's shoulder and gently pushed her back down into the chair while Smoothie quickly forced a glass of grapefruit juice, Bruly's favorite drink of choice, into her sister's hand. What happened to Tamago? Did his crew get him free? Big Mom barked the questions at the man who quickly scrambled for the papers. Our spy reported that Vince McSanji and Pirate Hunter had arrived on scene and were making their way to try and rescue their captain after he had yelled how he would be the king of pirates. Tamago said before a low whistle interrupted him. Kid's got balls of steel to say something like that in the same spot Roger was executed. Oven said with a small smirk as some of his siblings nodded in agreement. They wouldn't have made it in time since they did not know any ranged moves at the time the incident occurred. Tamago said finally and knew it was the wrong thing to say as the mirrors in the room began trembling harder while Bruly was visibly fighting to stay in her seat. The Or spy said that as Buggy was bringing the sword down on Straw Hat, he witnessed something he had only seen once before and couldn't believe it. Tamago said nervously, stepping further away from Bruly. Zoro. Sanji. Usopp. Nami. Sorry, but I'm dead. Those were Luffy's last words before he grinned happily. Tamago said, making Bruly go a shen wide as she nearly went boneless in her seat, her eyes wide. She could have lost him. She could have lost her baby boy before he even entered the Grand Line, all because of an arrogant brat and her son's incompetent crew, and her son would have been happy with that. The blade was just above his neck when the largest recorded strike of lightning in the area struck the platform and burnt it, while also making it collapse to the ground. Tamago said, causing Bruly to go even paler. Her son had been struck by lightning. How badly had he been injured? Citron asked, pale as well. Seriously, was her nephew a trouble magnet or what? That's where it gets surprising. According to our spy, Straw Hat Luffy stood up and laughed completely fine after the platform collapsed. I believe our spy called him saying I'm still alive, that's nice. Before he took off away from the scene. Tamago said, making more than a few of the siblings look shocked and gape in disbelief. Even Big Mom was surprised by this. How? Most of us would be gravely injured if not killed by such a thing, so how did he survive that? Cinnamon asked, staring at Tamago in shock and disbelief. It seems he had eaten a devil fruit by accident when he was a child. My best guess is that his devil fruit renders him immune to lightning. Tamago said quickly, flipping through the reports. According to this, he is also immune to blunt damage, such as clubs or punches that aren't infused with hockey, as well as any projectiles that aren't bladed or made of sea stone. Regular bullets quite literally bounce off of him without leaving a mark. Tamago quickly found that part of the report and made the siblings, except for Bruly, who was closing her eyes and trying to calm down her breathing, to exchange wide-eyed looks. What devil fruit did he eat? A loja of some type. Big Mom asked, just as surprised as her children, but doing a much better job of hiding it. No, he ate a Paramecia class fruit. Tamago said, making all of them stare at him in disbelief. What kind of Paramecia fruit did he eat? Parasparrow asked in disbelief even as he handed Bruly some candy for her to munch on, which she did with great aggression. He ate the gum fruit. The kid's body is made of rubber. Beej was the one to say from where he was sitting beside his wife who was holding their son in her arms. He's a supernova like me, I kept an eye on the kid's abilities in case we ever had to fight. Beej said when everyone looked at him in curiosity on how he knew that. From the reverse mountain it seems that he landed on the bounty hunter nest Whiskey Peak. We're not exactly sure what happened, but it seems that Pirate Hunter alone took out all 100 bounty hunters, as well as several higher-up agents of Crocodile's Baroque works. An unknown amount of time later it seems that they had landed on the island of Drum seeking medical help for the navigator cat burglar Nami. Tamago said, quickly hurrying along before Bruly could react to hearing her son had been in the clutches of bounty hunters. During this it seems that the king of the island, Wapple, had tried to take his kingdom back even though he had deserted it earlier due to a pirate attacking it. Tamago said, causing most of the Charlotte siblings to scowl in disgust, even the younger ones. He sounds like a coward. Deuce and Dulgy said, making the older ones nod. During the ensuing fight, Straw Hat protected a flag that meant a lot to a friend he had made at the time. A doctor from the reports. Straw Hat also ended up dethroning Wapple for good, as well as punching a world government acknowledged king. When they left the island it was in the company of their pet cotton candy lover Chopper. It says they left with a doctor joining their crew as well, but if they did then they've managed to keep the doctor away from all fights and from all marines. Tamago said, making Big Mom frown slightly. There's something more to that pet than meets the eye, I'm sure. Perhaps they and the crew are training it to be a last line of defense guard for their captain. Tefuku was thinking along the same lines as his mother, earning a helpless shrug from Tamago. There are rumors of it being a monster, but there has been no way for our spies to verify it for sure yet. Moving on from there, it seems that the crew then made its way to Alabasta with Princess Vivi in their company and reported to being in great debt to Luffy and his crew. According to our contacts in the kingdom, that was where Luffy met up with his elder brother for the first time since the brother had set off to become a pirate 3 years before Luffy had. Tamago said, making Bruly jerk slightly in her seat as she glared darkly. Luffy was an only child, I would know. Does that mean that dragon had? Tamago quickly cut off Bruly before she could get too worked up over it. Reports say that the brother in question is Portuguese D-Ace, otherwise known as Gold D-Ace, and had been raised as Luffy's adopted brother. He was the one they had been trying to execute at the War of Best 2 years ago. Tamago reported, making everyone pause for a moment before most of the siblings began paling or looking horrified. But Straw Hat had been there, and if I remember right then not only did Whitebeard die at the war, but so did Ace himself. Monty Dor said, making the few that hadn't looked horrified or pale look that way now. Luffy had to watch as the one he viewed as his older brother was killed right in front of him. Amand was the one to say what they were all thinking, while Bruly was visibly being restrained by Kompet to keep from running to the nearest mirror to find her son. After refusing to join the Whitebeard pirates when Ace offered him to, it's reported that Luffy's crew proceeded to defeat Crocodile's top officers, with Luffy himself fighting Crocodile a total of 3 times. It said that Luffy lost twice and was saved from death by someone else, although we're unsure who at the moment, before he finally defeated Crocodile the 3rd time just in time to stop the war and save the country's king. Tamago said, making Bruly struggle harder to get out of Kompet's hold, while Galette moved to use her powers to help restrain her sister. Let me go. I'll track Crocodile down and kill him myself. Bruly shouted at her siblings as a near-maniac glint appeared in her eyes. How dare that man try and kill her son? From there it seems that they left the kingdom with a new crew member and as allies of the Alabasta royal family and kingdom in general. From what some of our spies in various places managed to gather, Devil's Child Nico Robin had joined the crew after they beat her former boss Crocodile. One spy said that Sanji was heard gripping in a bar a few islands over about how she had said, and I quote, what he, meaning Luffy, had done to her was unbearable and he should take responsibility. End quote. Tamago said, making everyone over the age of 15 pause and all of them to slowly turn to stare at Bruly, who had frozen rather comically at that information. Releasing her hold on her younger sister, Kompet had seen the telltale signs of her sister about to go apeshit and wisely backed away while covering her ears. Just in time too, Bruly's screech was heard clear to Nuts Island. What? My baby boy is already married. Looks like Bruly is a grandmother. Perispero said amused as he watched his sister rage and curse about her boy apparently taking after his father. No. From our reports the unbearable thing he had done was simply saving Robin's life. There are no records or hints of them being more than friends and crewmates, or of Robin having any children. Tamago said, but a particularly violent string of curses from Bruly kept anyone from hearing him. From Alabasta, they traveled to Jaya where they then went to Skypedia. Tamago managed to call out when Bruly was taking a quick breath from her raging which distracted everyone. The mythical land in the clouds. Anana asked, making Tamago nod. Yes, although it's no myth. It seems that while in Skypedia, Luffy ended up fighting against a man named Enel, who called himself a god due to being a lightning loja. Tamago quickly flipped pages while Cracker narrowed his eyes. How badly was he hurt before he fled? He didn't have hockey then, did he? Cracker asked, looking a bit worried for his nephew. It seems his hockey awoke during the War of Best, so no, he didn't have it at the time, but he didn't need it to win. Tamago said, making many look confused, but Tefuku was the one to speak up. He said it just a few minutes ago. Luffy immune to lightning. Against a lightning loja with an obvious ego like Enel, Luffy could win even without hockey. Tefuku said, making Tamago nod at the third eldest son. After defeating Enel, they then sailed to Water 7 where their ship had begun breaking down. It seems the keel had been cracked during a prior battle. Tamago said, making those who sailed wince in sympathy and worry. There had been no way for his ship to be fixed. There seemed to have been some sort of argument between the sniper and Luffy over the ship that ended with the sniper leaving the crew. During this time it seems that the government agent CP9 had taken Robin by threatening the rest of the crew. Most of the reports are muddled on what exactly happened, but it seems that they had taken Robin to Eni's lobby and that Luffy took down many of the soldiers there when he thrashed it to get her back. Tamago glanced worriedly at Bruly. According to our reports, it seems that he burnt down the world government flag. Tamago said, wincing as Bruly sucked in a sharp breath. Big Mom ended up choking slightly on her tea cake and most of the siblings had their jaws on the ground. He declared war on the world for Devil's Child. Oven asked, gaping in disbelief and earning a nod. People do crazy things when they're in love, especially when their loved one is in danger. Big Mom said, her voice was almost whimsical and nostalgic. Not to mention if the report of Devil's Child bearing Luffy's child is true. A man would go to great lengths to protect the woman he loves, even more so when there is a baby involved. Beej said, smiling at his own wife and son. He was pretty sure that if Robin had Luffy's, or anyone else's, child it would have been in the paper, so he was pretty sure she didn't have one, but better to go along with it. More entertainment for him. At least he's taking responsibility for the baby. Bruly muttered, making her siblings nod in agreement. From there his crew fought against CP9 and they won. However, a buster call had already been sent out for the island, and it was only due to their ship somehow coming to their aid that they escaped alive with Robin in tow. From there it seems Luffy was out for several days, during which his new shipwright Frankie built them the new ship the Thousand Sunny. Tamago reported as he slid a picture of the Sunny onto the table where it was eagerly snatched up by Bruly. Not exactly snack themed like our ships, but it will certainly make people underestimate them. Perispero said, peering over his sister's shoulder before he gently took the picture from her to pass it around to the others and Mama. It seems that Vice Admiral Monkey D. Garp was seen in the area at the same time, but left the pirates unharmed. Tamago said, making Bruly narrow her eyes slightly. He's Dragon's father, which means he's Luffy's grandfather. Bruly admitted, making some of the other siblings let out low whistles and Big Mom to stare at her daughter in disbelief. She had never really pieced together the Monkey D part even after Bruly's marriage to Dragon. You sure know how to pick them, Bruly me. Smoothie said, making Bruly blush a bit and shrug sheepishly. She didn't even know it until after she had been married to Dragon when the man himself came busting up onto their ship during their honeymoon and berating Dragon for never inviting him to the wedding. Somehow escaping from Garp, they then seemed to have sailed straight into the Floridina Triangle where they fought and defeated the warlord Mariah. That also seems to be where they recruited a musician named Brook, who, well, it appears he either wears a skeleton suit all of the time or he is a skeleton. Tamago said, making Big Mom look interested. Oh, that's rare. Big Mom said, her eyes gleaming slightly while Bruly rested her head on the table. What is with my son and picking fights with warlords? Bruly asked no one specifically and earned amused looks from her siblings. After leaving the Floridan Triangle it seems they went to Saobody to get their ship coated. Tamago said, making Beej nod. I can tell you what happened there. All of us supernovas were there at the same time, and let me tell you something, Bruly. Beej blew out a puff of smoke from his cigar as he looked at his sister-in-law. Your son is either a mad genius in the making or one hell of an idiot. Beej said bluntly, causing Bruly to nearly fly over the table and try to wring Beej's neck. The only reason she didn't was because a man incompetent quickly grabbed her and nearly tackled her to the floor. Are you trying to get Bruly to kill you? Chiffon couldn't help but ask her husband, while Perospero and Galette moved to restrain their sister as well. Hey, it's not my fault her kid thought it'd be a good idea to punch a celestial dragon. Beej said, holding his hands up in his own defense and making everyone freeze. What did he do? Cinnamon asked, staring at her brother-in-law in disbelief and shock, along with everyone else, even Big Mom. Yeah, kid punched a celestial dragon and called an admiral on everyone. From what I heard, they escaped the admiral thanks to Dark King Rayleigh, but he and his crew were all sent flying thanks to the warlord Kuma. Beej said, causing Bruly to close her eyes and hit her head on the floor behind her, since Perospero and Galette had used their powers to stick her to the floor. My son is insane. I fully blame this on the idiot that stole him from me. Bruly said, breaking the silence amongst everyone and earning several snorts of laughter from her siblings. Mama. My grandson is an interesting one. Perhaps a bit stupid but interesting nonetheless. Big Mom said, laughing herself in disbelief at the report. Gotta say though, sis. Your kid has some big balls on him to do something like that. Defuku said, grinning and earning a glare from Bruly, who was scowling at all of her laughing siblings. Stop laughing at you idiots. This means I need to teach my son the merits of ambushes and actually using his brain, and that his actions have consequences. Seriously, what the hell was Dragon teaching him that Luffy went off and did something that fucking stupid? Bruly ranted about her idiot husband having stolen her son and just turned him into an idiot meathead like he was. Of all things for her boy to do, he punched a fucking celestial dragon. Her words just had her siblings laughing harder, however. After being separated by Kuma, it seems that Luffy has somehow ended up on Amazon Lily, the Isle of Women. Tamago said, earning jealous looks from the males of the family. The legendary Island of Women is your son either has the best luck in the world or the worst. Monty Dor said, looking jealous of his nephew's luck. I swear I'm going to have gray hair by the time he gets here. Bruly said, making her siblings burst out laughing again. Seriously, what were the odds that their cautious if clumsy sister would have a son that got into such messes? Somehow, even while he was stuck on the island, he managed to break into Marineford in an attempt to save his brother Ace. Tamago said, making all laughter stop as they stared at him in complete disbelief. Are you shitting me? Big Mom asked, staring at the man who shook his head in the negative. He broke into the government's most secure prison. Of course he did. He punched a celestial dragon after all. Bruly looked ready to just give up right now as she stared up at the ceiling in dismay. Reports say that he went in alone but came back out with an army that included the legendary Ivankov, former warlord Crocodile, and even Jim himself. From there they went straight to Marineford. Tamago said, making Beej give a small smirk. Yeah, kid made a hell of an entrance. Their ship got stuck at the top of a frozen tsunami and they came falling down from the sky towards a completely iced over plaza and somehow landed in the one area where there was no ice thanks to an earlier attack in the fight. Beej said, laughing a bit. There his heritage as Dragon's son was revealed to the world and he managed to be acknowledged even by Whitebeard going so far as to let Luffy lead the charge. Tamago hurried this part up since he knew that Mama did not like Whitebeard at all. Somehow he managed to make it up to the execution platform and free his brother, however on their way back to the ship something happened and Fire Fist Ace died in Luffy's arms. Tamago said, making all of the siblings look upset as they glanced at each other. They knew what it was like to lose a sibling, but for that sibling to die in their arms. How broken was Straw Hat? Bruly struggled against her binds, wanting to go find her son. She needed to check on him, see him for herself. It's unknown for sure what happened from there, but Straw Hat Luffy and his crew vanished for 2 years, and during that time, it seems as if he were being trained by Dark King Rayleigh himself. Tamago said, making all of the siblings look surprised and Big Mom's eyes too narrow. For Rayleigh himself to take an interest in Luffy. That means he saw something in the brat, something he liked. Big Mom said, her eyes narrowed dangerously as she thought about that for a moment. After the 2 years of training, the Straw Hats met back up on Saobody where they then left for Fishman Island. From our spies there I found out that a crew of fishermen were trying to take over the island and kill the royal family, and during the fight when Luffy and his crew tried to stop the crew led by Hody, that is when the candy factory was damaged. Tamago said, catching Big Mom's attention. So that's what really happened to the factory? Big Mom said, making Tamago nod. Yes, it was damaged in the fight, and Luffy claimed that he had eaten it so that you would target him instead of Fishman Island. Of course reports do say that he did eat a lot over the course of his stay at Fishman Island, so eating most of the candy is in fact completely possible. Tamago said, making Bruly nod slightly. Yeah, Dragon and his father both can put away a lot of food on par with any of us. I'm not surprised my boy has the same appetite. Bruly said, smiling ever so slightly at that. Dragon. Don't just blame it on the kid's father, Bruly. You've got a big appetite yourself, you know. Opera said, causing the other siblings to grin and tease their sister a bit. Yeah, last I checked you could eat twice your body weight in food without being full. Cinnamon teased her sister, who blushed a bit. Not yeah, Bruly is like a twig. She weighs less than any of us over the age of 15. Even Galette and Montidor weigh more than her. Smoothie said, smirking a bit while Bruly blushed. I can even pick Bruly up and carry her for a few hours without feeling strain. That's how light you are, sis, but you wouldn't know it from all the food you can eat. Perospero said, dissolving the candy that was on his sister and picking her up to prove his point. Put me down, you moron. Bruly said, blushing bright red and floundering slightly as Perospero picked her up and swung her around as if she weighed less than a feather, causing the others to break out laughing. And as we recently learned, Luffy and another supernova, the Surgeon of Death Law, has taken down and defeated Flamingo the Warlord, with Luffy being the one to do the most damage it seems. His new bounty poster came out earlier today. Tamago said, causing the laughter to stop as everyone stared at him as he held out a bounty poster. Let me see. Bruly struggled in Perospero's hold until she finally was set down and the bounty handed to her, despite her hand still being bound. 500 million Beelies. That's higher than Tamago's and Beeja's and almost as high as Snack's. Bruly said, shocked as she stared at the poster. Wow, my little nephew seems to be becoming quite the powerhouse. Perospero said as he took the bounty poster from Bruly and looked at it before handing it to the others, who all gaped in disbelief or made sounds of surprise. Interesting. The blood of the Charlottes really does run strongly within him. My bounty didn't reach that high until I was 23. You should be proud of Bruly. Big Mom said, smiling down at her daughter as she handed the wanted poster back. I am Mama. Here Bruly smiled brightly up at her mother and held up the wanted poster at the same time. None of her siblings could disagree with the next thing she said, not with the picture so close to her face to provide comparison to. He has my smile. Thanks for watching this video. Part 1 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.